I'm smarter than this, and I can't figure out how to work this thing today. There it is. Please join me in a moment of prayer. Almighty and ever-living God, during this time between pastor and people, between pulpit and pew, God, I ask that you hide your servant in the shadow of the cross. Give me a word for your people, both here and in diaspora, a word that is receivable and believable. And God, I ask that on this day in particular, that you comfort the afflicted, but more importantly, afflict the comfortable. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Before I get into the meat of the sermon, let me start by making a full disclosure. For many people, this is a difficult day to navigate. Mother's Day can be, for some, a patchwork of feelings that are complex and just hard to deal with. Know that I am holding you in prayer this morning, and if I am going to be fully transparent, this is a hard day for me, as I experienced the loss of both of my mothers within a 6-month period. So if today is hard for you, know that you don't travel this road alone. Amen. Second, just because you have not given birth to a little person does not make you any less of a mother. There are some women who have mothered me in a way that I didn't know I needed. So while I am using the term mother, I am in no way discounting or excluding any woman. Amen. Third, considering the news of the past 7 days, let me state for the record that I believe all women have the right to bodily autonomy and to make decisions based on their personal beliefs in consultation with their own medical doctors, and most importantly, their own relationship with God or whatever deity or non-deity regarding those medical decisions. Thank you. Now, that's not the sermon. If I were looking for a job, my friends, I would not seek a job in agriculture, because agricultural work is difficult. There is a special calling for those persons who work the land, but more importantly, those who work with livestock. There is a special calling for those who work with livestock, and there is a really special calling for those persons who work with sheep. Y'all know I like to be transparent, so let me confess to you this morning that I would not want to be a shepherd. Mentioned more than 500 times throughout the text we call the Bible, sheep, along with goats, were the most important domestic animals in the biblical world, so taking care of them was more than a notion. I would not want to be a sheep herder because, let me just tell you, it seems to be exhausting and thankless work. If you don't believe me, listen to this job description as written by by Dr. Gerald Mattingly of Johnson University in Knoxville, Tennessee. Dr. Mattingly says, shepherds are responsible for the safety of the sheep. Yes, this is a simple concept, but there is more to it than just keeping the sheep safe. Keeping sheep safe involves vigilance, for it is monotonous work. They require constant care since they are practically defenseless. Shepherds had to locate food and water for their flocks, and they often ranged far from home and went through numerous hardships. It was not easy being a shepherd. Shepherds had to constantly guard against thieves. But more importantly, the greatest threat to sheep safety came from animals such as wolves, lions, and tigers, and bears. It was not easy being a shepherd. Sheep are naturally gregarious animals, and the shepherds had to watch for strays and count the animals as they returned to the fold at night. You see, sheep had a habit of just wandering off, and the shepherd was responsible for finding any lost sheep. It was not easy being a shepherd. However, this morning, a prime example of how defenseless sheep act comes from me, of all places, a Looney Tunes cartoon from Warner Brothers. You do remember Looney Tunes, don't you? For our purposes this morning, the miniseries of cartoons that I'm talking about are based on two characters, Ralph E. Wolf and Sam Sheepdog. I promise you, I'm going somewhere with this. The series is built around the idea that both Ralph and Sam are just doing their jobs. Most of the cartoons begin at the beginning of the workday, in which they both arrive at a sheep grazing meadow, exchange pleasant chit-chat like we do at 7:30 in the morning at Belmont Station, and punch into the same time clock. Work having officially begun, Ralph repeatedly tries very hard to abduct the helpless sheep and invariably fails, either through his own ineptitude or the minimal efforts of Sam, who is frequently shown sleeping. And Sam always brutally punishes Ralph for his attempt. In many instances, there are also multiple copies of Ralph and Sam. At the end of the whistle, Ralph and Sam punch out their time clocks, again chat amiably, and leave only to come back again the next day to do it all over again. I would not want to be a shepherd because it is monotonous, thankless work. You are responsible for the safety of the sheep who cannot say thank you and many times are just off blissfully being sheep. And don't sheep sound like children, no matter their age? Children are gregarious creatures, gathering themselves. Children are often defenseless and are off blissfully and peacefully being children. That leads me to an unread reading this morning, Psalm 23, and our gospel text. In the unread text, the 23rd Psalm, which is well known, there are some interwoven themes in it and our gospel, and they help to explain who this person Jesus is and how he, like many mothers, are the ultimate shepherd. This morning, we find Jesus talking about, of all things, being a shepherd and, well, sheep. And while that might seem to be just a little strange, it's really not. Give me a moment to explain. While Jesus is the son of a carpenter, he is also the descendant of a shepherd. You do remember that Jesus is from the line of Jesse, and Jesse's son, one David, right? So it would make sense that in some ways Jesus would talk about sheep and being a shepherd. Not only familiar with Psalm 23 in particular, as it was in the hymnal of the temple, since the Psalms are the poetry and songs of the people. Before I get too deep into this, however, I've got to throw this freebie in. Both knew the sheep in their pasture. Let me remind you once again that before David became king of Israel and Judah, he was a shepherd out in the field taking care of the sheep, always singing to them, ensuring their safety, defending them from all hurt, harm, and danger, even at his own expense, going without sleep for them to make sure that they are safe. My friends, that's what a good shepherd does. I also need to make the following observation. Shepherds are just like mothers and women who care for and nurture children because they know their sheep, and those sheep know the shepherd's voice. Ask any mother if she can pick out her child's voice in a crowd. Mothers know the particular cry their child makes and what that cry means. There's a different sound, intonation, pitch between hungry, tired, bored, and danger. I can say this because I talk to the mothers in my world about it. My sisters, Christy, the baby, the one I always talk about, reports that when both of my nephews were babies, she could tell within 2 seconds wherever that child was in a crowd what the problem was. That, my friends, is a good shepherd. And don't forget that Jesus says it this way as well. My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. Let me speak from some personal experience. As a child, I lived in the middle of the 2700 block of Hazel Street in Augusta, Georgia, and no matter where I was on that street, or if I was in the block behind our house, if my bonus mother stood and called out my name from the porch, you can best believe I knew who she was and whose voice it was. When I lived in the 1100 block of Kennebec Street in Oxon Hill, Maryland, you can best believe that if Mary Alice called my name and I was not within hearing distance, someone was, and made sure that I knew that my shepherd, my mother, was looking for me. Not only was she looking for me, she knew me, and she knew that I would follow her voice. That's a good shepherd for you. And yes, while this morning's sermon title is Help Wanted, a Shepherd, I told you what Dr. Mattingly said about being a shepherd, but let me read you the job description of a normal, everyday mom, Maria Valdez. Mrs. Valdez is a graduate of the University of Arizona, and she describes herself as a political and neuroscience junkie. I read her words, and they impacted me in a way that I did not expect. A doctor does not have the most difficult job in the world. Let me add this in, and neither does a pastor. A mother does. A mother goes through a lot of what a doctor does. The sleepless nights, nights full of crying, distress, and even more. They aren't just in charge of one organ of their child, they oversee everything. The health, well-being, education, values, and morals, the respect the child has, and so much more. One error and the child can go the wrong route. They can choose alternate paths or lose their goals or ambition to strive for. One is taught how to be a good doctor, how to clip that aneurysm or remove that tumor. Doctors have guidance. For mothers, there isn't a manual on how to be a good mother. There's only love and motherly instinct, as many mothers call it. On top of that, they weigh with them their entire life, the errors of their child, but also the successes. Being a mother isn't easy. It's the hardest job in the world that comes with no instructions or manual whatsoever. I don't know how many times I've seen my mother cry because of my siblings or me. Unfortunately, too many times to count. She goes on. As a female, I am not sure I would be able to take on such a task, but I am happy to say that my mother has created an independent, strong woman who is ready to take on a medical career at full force and take care of her family. So, to my mother, thank you. And to all the great mothers out there, thank you for taking such a task, because you deserve a high five, a pat on the back, and all the flowers you'd like today. I agree completely with her sentiment. Moms, I couldn't do your job even if you paid me to. You are the ultimate shepherds, and congratulations, you're hired.